Anytime I talk about Google's Pixel phones, whether it's the lower end A series, it's the standard, it's the Pro, or more recently it is the Pixel Fold, I get a certain comment all the time. People talk about that Google Tensor chip that is inside the device, something that is being made in conjunction with Samsung, but by Google, and they say that is not a flagship processor, and therefore these devices are not flagship devices. They talk about something like the Pixel Fold and they say, hey, the Z Fold has the Snapdragon processor. It's faster, it's more powerful, it's more efficient, it has less heat production. That is a true flagship. That is not. Pixel 7 Pro, of course, the 8's coming soon. They say the same things about that. Really, ever since Google stopped putting the top of the line processors in their phones, this has been what we've been hearing, going back to the Pixel 5, which had a Snapdragon 7 series, and then the 6 began this Tensor journey. We hear this stuff all the time. So you might think these devices are selling worse and worse because of this vocal portion of the crowd. However, we're going to look at this threads thread, I guess is what you would call it, that I put together, showing this bit of information. I'm going to try to pronounce this. I'm going to go with Canalys. They have some data on their website. I'm going to drop a link down in the description to this actual news story. We're going to kind of break it down here. And surprise, surprise, Pixel phones are not selling worse and worse with their mid-range processor, the Google Tensor. They are, in fact, selling better and better. We're going to take a look at this table here, and we're going to go through this because the results are fairly surprising. So what we have here are Q2 2023 shipments in millions. We have the market share over the same time frame, and then we have last year Q2 and last year's market share. Now what you're going to notice looking at annual growth, this is the big surprising thing for me, is that everyone is dropping in growth. Okay, so 2023 has been a bad year for smartphones. Everyone is seeing a decline year over year. I should say everyone except for Google, who saw a nearly 60% year over year growth. In 2022, they shipped 800,000 devices. Now keep in mind when we look at this, they are specifically calling out smartphone shipments. So yes, they had no tablet last year, they shipped a tablet this year, but this should be specifically talking about smartphones. And then in Q2 of 2023, they were at 1.2 million. Their market share went from 2% to 4%. They doubled up their market share. And yes, of course, it is fair to point out that a 4% market share compared to 24 or 54% in North America, which is what we're talking about here, is a very, very small percent. We're not trying to say in this video that Google is taking the world by storm, that they're going to be competing with Samsung and Apple in market share anytime soon, because that's just not realistic. But to go from 800,000 to 1.2 to double your market share year over year while everyone else is dropping, everyone else is shrinking and you're growing, that goes against the narrative that a lot of people would have you believe. And if you keep with this trend, you're going to catch up at some point, right? So what can be responsible for this trend? What was going on in Q2 of this year? Well, we saw the launch of the Pixel 7a. Last year had this 6a, which we know sold fairly well as well. So did the 7a potentially outsell the 6a? I think that is possible, but we also had something else happen in that quarter. Granted, it was at the end of the quarter, the very tail end. We had the Pixel Fold. So it is entirely possible, and maybe it's probable, that the Pixel 7a sold a little better than the 6a, but the Pixel Fold is responsible for the rest of that number going up. And again, if we look back at that number again, maybe we can kind of give like a super potentially inaccurate guesstimation. We're talking about 400,000 units. Do we think the 7a sold 400,000 more units? No, of course not. The 7a is not all of that. So we have 400,000 units to kind of account for here. Well, maybe we're talking about the Pixel Fold in that area. We also have the anecdotal evidence that the Pixel Fold was sold out. Many SKUs were sold out of the Pixel Fold when it launched. Different hardware, configuration, storage colors, different things like that were sold out shortly after the launch. So we don't know what the Pixel Fold sold. What we know is we're talking about 400,000 additional units to account for. And these are the devices that shipped in that window. So they're going to be coming from there more than likely. Now, of course, something else that likely aided Google in this span of growth is lack of competition. So in this same area, we did not have a new iPhone. We did not have a new Galaxy device. Shortly after that, of course, we got the Z Fold 5, the Z Flip 5, and now the iPhone 15. So Q3 is likely to be a bounce back quarter for Samsung and Apple. It's going to be really interesting to see how Google kind of holds on to this growth. Do they continue growing? As I said, the Pixel Fold launched at the end of the quarter. Presumably most of the sales, or at least a lot of them, are coming after that quarter. So maybe the Pixel Fold continues to sell relatively well and they maintain a bit of growth. And then, of course, the Pixel 8 is right around the corner. October the 4th, we do have a new Pixel launch coming. So hopefully they can kind of go from strength to strength and continue this upward trend. So there you go, guys. Despite what you might read on the internet, the people that think that Google is doing X, Y, and Z wrong, that they shouldn't be using the Tensor chipset, they are growing. Pixels are selling better and better. In fact, they are selling more phones now than they have ever sold before, which I think is very interesting and bodes well for the future. Tensor G3 should be a big improvement, and then it might be G5 before they are fully custom. Google is thinking very long term with this stuff, and they're not really worried about growing leaps and bounds overnight. They're a big company. They're going to have their own trajectory with this stuff that we may not understand, that we may kind of lose sight of from our perspective. Pretty interesting stuff. Overall, again, link to the full article down below. Go check that out. I'll see you on the next one. Until next time, stay nerdy.